Well, it's time for the pre-show, everybody. Let's get the live stream going. This is the pre-show for today's Network Plus study group. If you are watching this live, we'll be starting in about 10 minutes. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes and we'll get started. And a day after this, there's a big list of timestamps in the video description on YouTube. You're welcome to click along there to go wherever you would like. It's been a week. I've had a week off. It's really been 2 weeks since I've done one of these. A little bit rusty. Got to tell you, this whole slacking off thing, that doesn't work well. That's not going to work at all. So we've got, let's do some check of some cameras. Camera 1 is working. That's the main camera. Camera 2 is the bird cam. Let's just cut right to camera 3. Actually, can't cut to camera 3 because I'm not on camera 3. Let's get camera 3 ready. We'll stick my head in it, if I can remember how to do that. Now we go to camera 3. Let's get camera 4 ready. Camera 4. Oops. And see what happens when you don't, you're not here for a while. Camera 4. Let's just get me in it. Having problems with my cameras today. Really, the problem's not with the camera. That's oh, it is right. Camera 3 is this. Camera 4 is this. And I'm in it, so it's good. I'm in it to win it. See, now it's both of me. Nobody wants that. Let's clear me out and put this back on. See? Oh, boy. Had a lovely week off, thank you. Chicago is checking in. DC is in the chat room. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice there is no chat room there. You'll want to go over to professormesser.com/live, where the chat room is there. It's the live event chat. There's more Floridians. Sarasota is here. We are in Tallahassee, here at the world headquarters of Messer Studios, where it is a balmy 105 degrees with the heat index. It's a little warm here in the summer, as it turns out. Washington State is here. We've got Columbus. Ohio is checking in. Germany, hey Germany, thank you for being here. India is here. London is here. Covington, Georgia. Hey, Georgia. How y'all doing? Vegas is here. You do not need an account on Socrative unless you plan. I don't know if you need an account at all. No, I started this up so you would not need an account. You should just be able to go to professormesser.com/QA unless they've changed things, which is entirely possible that that's the case. So you can tell me. Dubai, DC here again, Garland, Texas, Seattle, Washington. See, the temperature's probably nicer in Seattle than it is in Tallahassee right now. That's the place to be in the summers, it turns out. We've got all Network Plus Q&A today. So we're doing Network Plus today, and we're doing Security Plus Thursday. So I'm kind of cramming it all in here in the last week of the month. That's what I get for taking a week off. They talk like it's such a problem. No, we're just going to do it Tuesday and Thursday. Why not? Why don't we do one every day? All right, maybe that's a little much. Raleigh is here. Knoxville, Tennessee is here. San Diego, California checking in. Welcome. Oklahoma is here. There is, I had to go back and read through. I did all of these questions about a month ago because I knew I'd be traveling. I had some things to do this month, so I was away. So I knew I would be traveling, so I did it all a month ago. And now I have to remember, what did I do during this last month? Well, we're going to find out in 5 minutes what that is when we get started. So welcome if you're joining us. Our tweets and emails went out just a few moments ago. Thank you for joining us. If you got your notifications, we're doing all Network Plus today. Bradenton is here. Welcome. Long Beach, California, I'm assuming. There's probably more than one Long Beach. Really, there's only one Long Beach, isn't there? So there we go. I just covered the bases with that one. That was a very politically correct. So no matter where you were, which Long Beach you're from, that is the right one. Let's see if I can fix where I'm sitting. Sometimes it's difficult to get right in the middle. I think it's okay. It's hard to tell. Oh, I got me up on the screen twice. Let's not do that. Nobody wants those. Okay, cameras are good. Streaming looks great. Hi, stream. I've been playing around with audio, so I'm not sure if the stream audio is really where I want it yet, but it's pretty good right now. I might hike it up for Thursday. We're going to play around with it and see what happens. Utah's here. Missouri's checking in. I have just replaced, for probably the second time, the power distribution unit that I have that's literally on the ceiling, because that's where all these lights plug in. I don't know why I thought I'd put it on the ceiling. Like that was going to be a great idea. Why didn't I just run the cables longer so they would reach the floor? But here we are, which I guess I could still do. Now that I'm thinking it through, I may remove it from the ceiling and just run all of those things down the wall back here. You can't see it. It's in the studio. It's back behind me where the bird cam is that I'm currently pointing at. So every time that distribution unit goes out because a storm comes through, gets hit by lightning, there's a surge, or it just stops working, I have to get my ladder out, climb to the top, do this. So now you've now made me realize what a mistake that absolutely was. And I should instead put a network connection down here and just run that connection through there. I think that's what I'm going to do. In fact, I have a connection. Where can I run these cables? That's the real challenge, is figuring it out. We'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. We are a few minutes away from getting started with the Network Plus study group. It is 2 minutes. 2 minutes to go. Let's make sure the tweeter is working. It is. Fantastic. People are getting the tweets. That all looks good. I think we're ready. What's the worst that could happen, right? How bad could it possibly be? It could be very bad. Chris is in Virginia. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We've got, I think, enough to get us through the hour. I think we've got plenty of questions to get through the hour. Probably have too many. Yeah, the internet could break. Who knows what could happen? Anything could go wrong at this point. That's the beauty of the live stream. That's why it's fun. Tampa again. Welcome. Orlando, Ohio. A lot of Florida checking in this time. Thanks for being here. Fort Smith, Arkansas. Welcome. Thanks. More Arkansas. Lots of you. Thanks for being here. There's Baston. Hey, Baston. Thanks for being here. Got to get back up there. This would be a great time of the year to be in Boston. It'd be fantastic. Let's see what we've got going on here. I think we've got cameras ready. We got less than a minute to go. This looks good. That looks good. Graphics are set. I think we're okay. A lot of buttons. There's a lot of moving parts here, but I think we got it. Maryland. My Maryland is here. Welcome. We've got a few things to go through. Not much at the beginning. Not much has changed with Network Plus. We just finished all the A Plus that's been going on. So there's a lot of other things happening now behind the scenes. We're off to the next thing. So we'll have to figure out what that is. Tampa's here. PA. Welcome. I think we're about ready to get started. It's the top of the hour. It's time for the study group. Let's see what we can do. Here we go, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2019 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group, coming to you from our world headquarters here in Tallahassee, Florida. My name is James Messer. Thank you for joining us for this 1 hour of Network Plus Q&A. We're going to spend this first hour where I'll give you questions, and you'll be able to answer those questions live on the inner tubes. You'll be able to click a button and you'll be able to see if you think you know the answer to some of these questions I'll be posing for you. In the second part of the study group, really what I call the study group after show, where we stop after the first hour. The study group's over, but instead of everybody going home, I open up the phone lines and we just hang out. And you can ask any questions you would like, either on the phone lines, you can ask questions in the chat room and do any of those things as well. In the chat room, which is, by the way, if you're watching live on YouTube, you'll notice there's no chat room there. That's because the chat room is on my website at professormesser.com/live. All the instructions are there for answering the questions. The chat room is there. The live stream is there. Everything is on that live page, and you'll be able to find everything that you're looking for. Don't forget about joining us on Twitter and on YouTube. You type in professormesser.com/ the name of the social media thing that you would like to be able to find. It's /Twitter, /YouTube, /whatever it happens to be. And you'll find, of course, much more on the website. You can find all of those on the professormesser.com website. We're able to do these study groups thanks to your support. Of course, every minute of every one of my videos, every training class I do is available for you to watch for free without any registration. They're not behind a paywall. You don't have to deal with pop-ups. There's none of this crazy nonsense. You simply watch the video and learn what you need to learn. Some of you like to have an offline version of the course as well. I have those for sale. You can find those at professormesser.com/getnetplus, all one word there, which have my HD videos. They all have closed captioning. There is MP3 audio files, and you even have the option to get my course notes with that as well. So lots of options available if that's something you would like to do. We've also got questions for you online from the study group. You can find those at professormesser.com/popquiz. Maybe that can help you with some of your Network Plus studies. I need to add a few more to those, as a matter of fact. This study group, of course, is available for replay immediately after this is over. YouTube does a little bit of processing, takes a couple of minutes, and then they make the video immediately available, so you don't have to wait for that. And then later today, I will edit or chop this up into two different pieces, the study group and the after show. I'll make them available as podcasts, and you can either subscribe to those podcasts or listen to those streaming at professormesser.com/podcast. That link also has the link to my A+ and my Security Plus podcasts as well. They're really just a video replay in audio form. So some of what we're going to do today will be visual because this is a visual medium, the way I've described it. But most of you will be able to study along with the podcast. I think there will be very good for those things. I think that will work with all of that. I mentioned earlier that there is timestamps available on this video, usually about a day or so after. My marketing manager, Lori, hi Lori, works on this afterwards. She goes through every minute of this. She has to listen to everything I say and puts in the timestamps on the YouTube video description, which is really nice if you're trying to go straight to a particular topic, if you're trying to find that call-in that you heard last month, or you want to move from question to question very quickly. That's one good way to do it. So you can hop around so you don't have to deal with any time delays or anything else on your side. You can find the information you need as quickly as possible. Thank you, Lori, for doing that. That is a lot of people sent me emails saying that's really useful. So that's fantastic. We have all Network Plus questions today. These come directly from the current version of the Network Plus exam, which is the N10007. This was released in March of 2018, so it's been out about a year and a few months at this point. This Network Plus certification has all of these questions, and everything we do is related to this version. So the N10007. So make sure all of the study materials that you use for Network Plus have N10007 on them. Do not use study materials that have a different version on them. The exam itself is 90 minutes long. There's a maximum of 90 questions. Some of these are multiple choice. Most of them will be multiple choice, but there will be a handful of questions at the beginning of the exam that are not multiple choice. These are performance-based questions. And performance-based questions are anything but multiple choice. They might be a fill in the blank. They might be a matching question. It might ask you to put things in a particular order. You may be doing drag and drop. It could be at a command line. They ask you to change things. So the performance-based questions are important to know that you'll be getting a different type of question. And a lot of people don't realize these are coming. They think the entire exam is going to be these very involved questions. It's really just a handful of those when you start the exam. Make sure you have the objectives. Everything we do today and everything from my videos comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. You can get a link to those at professormesser.com/objectives. Well, you're going to answer questions today. I have questions available for you from Network Plus. The way you do this is you pop open a new browser window and you go to professormesser.com/QA. There is also an app available. This is the Socrative Student app. That's what you'll want to download from your favorite app store. And you'll want to go to a room name that it asks you for. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. So make sure you have the spelling right or you won't be able to see the question that's waiting for you there. And if you do all of that right, there'll be a question waiting for you right now. The question will show you which of the following would commonly be labeled on a CSU/DSU. Now, if you were here last month, this was a question that we did last month. So let's see if you can remember the answer to this question. To answer this question, do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you'll be able to answer that. And you just stay on that page. The questions will change on the page as I click through them. And if you go to that page, you'll be able to see me on that or see the answers on that page as well. So the question asks, which of the following would commonly be labeled on a CSU/DSU? Is the answer application type, speed and duplex, version number, circuit ID, or IP utilization? Which one of those would it be? So that helps as well. The application type, speed and duplex, version number, circuit ID, and IP utilization. And you can see on my side as you're answering this, I see the numbers change in real time, being able to see all of these things as they're going through. We'll be able to see how you answer for these as you are plugging in your answer and submitting it. Remember the answer that you submit. I don't think they've changed it where after you submit, you don't get to see what you submitted. Maybe they've updated that by now. I need to play around with that and see if they've made any changes recently. This is a question, as I mentioned, directly from last month. So some of you remember the answer. Some of you don't remember the answer. Some of you may have not been here last month, so you haven't seen this before. So I think a lot of you are able to get into Socrative and you're able to see the answers as they're coming up. And you would know if you were here last month that WAN circuits are usually connected to a serial line, to a router, and they usually have the WAN connection coming in from the provider on the other side to the CSU/DSU. And when you have a problem with that WAN connection, you need to know information that will help you troubleshoot this with your wide area network provider. One of the first things they're going to ask you for is the circuit ID of this. That's because there's not much more associated with that CSU/DSU. They want to know what the circuit ID is. They want to understand maybe what you're seeing on your side, but they need that circuit ID so they can connect to that circuit and see the same thing that you're seeing. They can look at statistics. They can view the value and information of what's going through that connection. So they need that. So if you have a problem, you need the WAN provider's name, you need their phone number, you need the circuit ID, and any other details internally that can reference that particular WAN circuit. And it's nice if they are on the WAN circuit itself. You should be able to look at your CSU/DSUs if you have a lot of them. And if you're not getting any green lights or you're getting red lights, you should be able to look at that CSU/DSU and know exactly what circuit number that happens to be. That will save you so much time if you have that information available. Those circuit IDs are pretty valuable. So those of you that answered D circuit ID, 55% of you, that is the right answer. You got it absolutely right. Application type, a CSU/DSU really knows nothing about an application. The purpose of a CSU/DSU is to take a connection from your router and effectively convert it, translate it into the connection that's being used by your wide area network provider. So it's performing that translation in the middle. And it really doesn't care what's going through the connection. It doesn't even know about IP addresses, has no idea. It's really more of a way to convert between the signals from the wide area network provider and signals that your router would understand. So application type would not be applicable. Version number would not be applicable either. There is no real version number associated with the CSU/DSU, although technically there is firmware on that device generally we really don't care what the version number is when we're trying to troubleshoot a wide area network problem. And quite honestly, you rarely change firmware on a CSU DSU. You have IP utilization. Nobody chose IP utilization. And as I mentioned, the CSU DSU knows nothing of what's running over that link. You may not even be running TCP/IP over that connection. There is also speed and duplex. 36% of you did choose speed and duplex, but again, the speed of the wide area network connection and duplex of the wide area connection are generally not as important as knowing what that circuit ID is. In fact, duplex really is never an issue. Wide area network connections are generally full duplex type connections, although they don't have to be. That's generally what they are. Generally, when you think about speed and duplex, you're talking about an Ethernet connection, and CSU DSUs don't have an Ethernet connection. So that's one that you might want to know. That's one that can help you whenever you're working through any of those issues and trying to figure out, how do I solve problems with this wide area network? That's how you would do it, is to know the circuit ID. That's the one place to start where everybody needs to be able to start troubleshooting. So there's your rewind question. Looks like everybody's able to get into the study group questions. They're able to answer them. So now let's do some new questions for Network Plus. The first question of every study group, I like to give you a performance-based question. Now, as I mentioned earlier, performance-based questions are not multiple choice. They are anything but multiple choice. They might be command line questions. They might be asking you to perform a drag and drop. You may be configuring and setting up a message on the screen or a configuration of a device on the screen. You could be putting things in a particular order. Today, it's more of a question that's asking you multiple types of responses. So let's see, more of a drag and drop, I think, if I had to describe the question today. Let's give you your first question of the day. Our performance-based question of the month is this one that asks, categorize the following protocols as secure or insecure. And the options are SNMP v2, HTTP, SSH, FTP, IPsec, and Telnet. Those are 6 different protocols. All 6 of those are protocols that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and they can be put into a category of a secure protocol or an insecure protocol. Which one is it for these 6 protocols? So for those of you listening in the podcast, here we go again with these protocols. They are SNMP v2, HTTP, SSH, FTP, IPsec, and Telnet. If you know the answers, you can go to professormesser.com/QA. It's a fill-in-the-blank question. So you can even put maybe S is secure or I is insecure. Either way, as long as you're able to remember what those are once you lock them in, it's going to help you quite a bit to be able to do that. I think most of you are going to know what some of these are as they are going through. I'm watching the responses come in real time on my other screen here, and I'm not showing this one because it's a fill in the blank, and there's no way to summarize what people think this happens to be as far as secure or insecure. So I'm looking at what some of these, and some of you are doing very good with these. I think there's one that's really tripping up people the most as I'm looking through these. And some of you are spot on. I think a lot of you have done a good job with this. There is an entire section of the exam that deals with secure protocols and insecure protocols. This is just a few of them. So make sure you're familiar with those topics when you get into understanding more about what is secure and what is insecure. You may have to break that down on your exam pretty well. I'm going to let a few of you plug in the last couple of answers as you're able to get those plugged in. We get pretty good latency, very low latency on this type of stream. So as soon as I say something, 5 seconds later, you're able to hear what I say, which is extremely good. We're using YouTube to be able to stream this, and they're able to stream it very, very well. If you're trying to change the way things look on the screen, or you would like it to be clear, there's a little cog wheel at the bottom of your screen, and you can change resolutions if that helps you a little bit. It might help you when we get into some of these other questions and being able to do this. So as one of those, some folks that are asking, what is secure? Well, that is the big question. You have to understand what a secure protocol is and what a secure protocol is not. And there's not really, I don't think, a debatable one in here, but we can talk about that as we go to the answers. And now would be a good time to do that. Let's go to the answers and categorize these as secure or insecure. This comes directly from the N10 007 section 4.5, and my video called Device Hardening is where we're getting those from. So let's start with SNMP v2. SNMP v2. There are actually 3 versions of SNMP that you might run into in the wild, in use today. SNMP version 1, version 2, and version 3. Version 2 being the one in the middle is not the version that provided any type of data privacy or security. In fact, has none associated with it. So SNMP v2, because there is no inherent protections or encryption associated with that, would mean this is an insecure protocol. If you were to look at SNMP v2 communication occurring over the network, you got out your Wireshark or some other packet capturing device, and you watch the SNMP v2 traffic go back and forth, you would be able to see all of that traffic in the clear. So that one really is not a very secure protocol, certainly categorized as insecure. Another protocol where you're able to look at the network and capture all of the traffic going by and see it in the clear because there is no inherent encryption is HTTP. That one I think was a bit of a giveaway. Most of you are familiar with HTTP. A lot of you have used this before, and a lot of you know that HTTPS, which is the secure version of HTTP, would be, as the name implies, secure, which means HTTP is not secure. We put that in as an insecure connection. So that's one where if you're trying to figure out these, it's stepping through and understanding the encryption or being able to see the data as it's going over the network. That's how we qualify a protocol as being secure or insecure. Our first secure protocol in this list is the third one, SSH, Secure Shell. It's part of the name, Secure Shell. Again, maybe a giveaway for those. This is one where Secure Shell is great for terminal communication. If you need to get into the network, there was a big network outage yesterday, an internet outage yesterday that dealt with wide area network connections and BGP and Verizon, and it was a mess. First thing in the morning here on the East Coast, and we had massive outages, all because of a routing issue relating to BGP that occurred. And when that problem happened, I had to get into my servers to see what was going on to make sure it wasn't something on my side. So I used SSH to be able to secure shell into my servers to see how they were performing. And the servers were just fine. It wasn't me in that case. It was Verizon causing the problems, along with some other detailed issues associated with BGP. There's some interesting write-ups over on the Cloudflare blog if you want to know more about that. They had a great blog entry that describes exactly what went on yesterday. It's remarkable how quickly one little thing can bring down massive parts of the internet even today. Let's have a look at the next protocol, number 4, FTP. The file transfer protocol has zero encryption or security built into it. There's obviously a username and password function, but if you were to capture packets going across that FTP connection, you would be able to read the username and the password that was being sent over the network. That's why we don't use FTP unless you're logging in as anonymous with just anything you would like as the password. FTP is insecure. We'll certainly put it in that category. The next option, IPsec. Again, kind of a giveaway because part of the name is IP security. It is a secure protocol commonly used for tunnels to be able to connect different connections over perhaps insecure links. If you have 2 sites and you would like to connect those sites over the internet, it's very common to create a secure tunnel so that all of the communication between those sites is made over this encrypted communication using the IPsec protocol. And you have the last option here is sort of the little brother to SSH. It's terminal communication in the clear, and as you can surmise from this, telnet being in the clear means that it is an insecure protocol. These are the important types of delineations to make whenever you're trying to determine if a protocol is secure or if a protocol is insecure. If you're able to look at that traffic going over the network and determine, am I able to see what's going on, then that is if you're able to see it, it's definitely an insecure protocol. So to quickly summarize this, SNMP v2 is insecure, HTTP is insecure, SSH is secure, FTP is insecure, IPsec is a secure protocol, and Telnet is certainly an insecure protocol. None of us should be using Telnet at this point. Are we clear on that one? I think we're all up to date on that. There's very few times you would ever want to use Telnet, although you will find when you get into anything relating to IT, and especially on the networking side of IT, you'll suddenly find that there will be something relating to Telnet that you're going to have to do, and it will drive you crazy. Just so you're aware, it's nice to have in your back pocket if you ever do need to use it. So that's one of those. So let's quickly, before we go to the next question, this is a pretty good question that comes up, especially with these performance-based questions, is what if you got one of these wrong on the exam? What if you got partially right and wrong answers on this? Would you get partial credit from CompTIA? There's a frequently asked questions file on the CompTIA website that answers this very question, because this is a frequently asked question. Do you give partial credit? And in the past, they've said, we rarely give partial credit. They actually use the term rarely. And they have updated the answer probably a year or so ago to say, well, we sometimes give partial credit. They don't give any information about their grading. We do believe that every question is worth a different number of points. We don't know what those points are. We don't know which questions they are. We're not told this information after the exam. You have no idea the grading that went into this. All you get is a final score. So they sometimes tell you that sometimes they will give you partial credit. You just don't know if that's going to be the case for you or not. So I guess the best answer to that is you have no idea. You really don't. Just do the best you can. Hope they give you whatever credit they will. Yes, it's very vague. I agree. They really don't give that information. The grading system on industry certification exams is a closely guarded secret by every single entity. I think it is what they consider to be a competitive advantage to how they do the grading. Maybe that's just them being overly protective of their grading process. I just would think probably percentage would work pretty good, wouldn't it? Just give me number of points, even if it's a different number of points. But it's a very complex and mysterious process. So just do the best you can. Focus on getting as much right as you can. Don't worry about what you would get wrong. Worry about getting things right, and you're going to do just fine on the exam. Let's do another question. This one is a little bit of a performance-based question, I guess, because it's a visual question on your screen. It's really not a performance-based question. This is really a fill-in-the-blank question, which I guess would qualify, wouldn't it, as a performance-based. So we're gonna have two performance-based questions in a row. Here's the next one. This one, unfortunately, is not one. Well, maybe I can describe it to the folks on the podcast and see how we do with this one. Let's go to our next question, and it is a visual question that asks, how many broadcast domains are in this network design? How many broadcast domains are in this network design? So let me see if I can describe the picture that's in front of us. So we have a switch, a router, and a switch. And on the first switch, I have 5 devices connected to that switch, and a sixth device connected to the switch, which is the router that's in the middle of the picture. And on the other side of the picture is another switch, and on that switch are 4 devices that are connected to that switch. And of course, that switch is connecting to the router as well. The router's in the middle of this picture here. So the question is asking, how many broadcast domains are in this network diagram, network design, that network map? How many broadcast domains are there on the screen? This is a fill-in-the-blank question, and you can fill in the answers here with whatever you would like. If you think if you think it's 1, if you think it's 2, if you think it's 16, if you think it's 100, you just put in the answer you think it is. And we will have a look at what we think it is for this as well. If you think you know the answer, you can answer that following the link at the bottom of that page, which is at professormesser.com/QA. And please do not answer in the chat room. Don't give any hints in the chat room. Don't give any of those. We don't want to think this through. Everything you need to be able to answer this question is given in that diagram. How many broadcast domains are in this network design? That is exactly what you want to work through. So this is one where when you're working through the details of any of these exam questions, do not overthink these exam questions. These everything they're going to give you on this question, you'll be able to answer. There's no extraneous or additional information that you would need. And if you start overthinking these questions, especially with networking, you can create an extremely complex network from a simple diagram, but they didn't give you an extremely complex network diagram. They gave you a single network diagram and a single question. Every question is its own world, and you should think in the scope of only what they have given you with those details. That's the biggest hint I can give you, not just for this question, but any question on your exam. You would not, if you're making assumptions about what they're telling you, you've already gone too far. Scale it back to only the world of information that they're giving you, and you're going to just do just fine on that particular question. This is one where, and I'm looking at the answers coming through, I think many of you are doing pretty well with this one. We're going to step through exactly how we got this answer in just a moment. How many broadcast domains are in this network design? I'm going to wait for a few more folks to answer. We're having a few more come in as we do this. Let's see what I think the answer is for broadcast domains on this network design. And I have summarized this. Let's see if I can show what I think it is. I'm going to scale up on my screen. I have one broadcast domain right here. And I have another broadcast domain right here. So for those of you listening on the podcast, I have highlighted one broadcast domain that is the 5 devices connected to that single switch. And then I've also got another broadcast domain on the other side of the page, which is the 4 devices connected to the other switch. So the router sitting in the middle effectively divides those broadcast domains. So my answer on this particular question, and the answer which I would say for the vast majority of you is 2. There are 2 broadcast domains in this particular network design. This is one where the switches have a single broadcast domain associated with them, and the router sitting in the middle separates broadcast domains. One of the nice things about a router, and one of the reasons we have routers, is so we would not have so many devices connecting and being able to send broadcasts out over the network. You put a router in the middle and you're splitting up the broadcast domains. So this would be one that does come in handy. So you're able to see these different broadcast domains. Now in this, a lot of you were trying to figure out, what if you had VLANs? Well, each individual VLAN would be its own broadcast domain, certainly. But you'll notice this diagram did not show any VLANs. There was no complexity to this. There was a simple switch, a router, and a switch. So that's one where, in fact, in most switch configurations, that's a pretty common one to have this here. Now, why would it not be an individual broadcast domain for each one of those connections? I think you probably are thinking of a collision domain, which on a half duplex network, and I guess technically on a full duplex network, you can call it a collision domain. Collision domains, especially on a switch network, would be each individual connection. So there would be separate collision domains for each one of these, which means we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think I counted that right. So 11 collision domains and 2 broadcast domains in this particular network diagram. So that at least can help you understand the differences. And of course, I have an entire video that describes the differences between broadcast domains and collision domains, because that's the name of the video. It's in the N10007 videos in section 1.3. So that might help you. Now, obviously, these days, we're all running full duplex. Nobody's running half duplex. There's not going to be any collisions, but we still call them collision domains because the potential exists that if you did configure it as half duplex, it would create collisions on that particular network interface, because that's required on a half duplex Ethernet connection. So that would be very helpful to have that there. So your answer here is 2 broadcast domains for those. Hopefully you're able to look at that and see what the differences were between broadcast and the collision domains. If you don't know the difference between these or understand the value of having these separate broadcast domains, be sure to check out that video. I go into some detail about why broadcast domains are important, why collision domains are at least useful from a legacy perspective so that you can understand them. And you may find, again, when you connect to these networks and your network administration, you may find half duplex devices on that network for some reason, maybe an accident or maybe on purpose. So that would be used for this. So this is one, and the questions in the chat room, would the interfaces on the router in use be considered broadcast? They are. They're part of those broadcast domains. This interface on this side is broadcast domain, and of course the router is connecting to it. And the other side of the router is a broadcast domain, and yes, the router is connecting to that. The router is on the left side of the router is on the same broadcast domain as the devices on the left side, and the router connection on the right side is in the same broadcast domain as the other devices on the right side. They all share the same broadcast domain. So that is not, routers don't get their own broadcast domain. I guess they'd only be talking to themselves. What good is that? Broadcast domains are useful because they're able to communicate out very efficiently to everybody who happens to be connected to that network. It becomes inefficient if there happen to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of devices, and now everybody's spending their time listening to broadcasts instead of doing any actual work. So it's a balancing act to figure out how many devices you would have on a network. Am I going to have a problem with broadcast? It's just another one of those parameters you have to think about when you're designing your network configuration, and it's different on everybody's network because you have different applications, different connections, different types of broadcasts, and that's why you become a network administrator, because nobody else wants to deal with that, but you know the differences and you can handle it. That's one of the nice things about having a job where you understand the nuances of that and can think about the planning, the design, and the ongoing maintenance and monitoring of those as well. So another thing to think about. I think I actually have a multiple choice question coming up. So let's do a multiple choice question for our Network Plus. This one, here we go, is a question that asks, let me click it on my side so I can read it to you. A company is building out a new floor of a building and is running network cables from each desk to the IDF. How should these wires terminate in the IDF? The possible answers are an RJ45 wall jack, into a concentrator, a 66 block, directly into the switch, or a 110 block. Those are your 5 options. So a company's building out a new floor of a building and is running network cables from each desk to the IDF. How should these wires terminate in the IDF? Is it an RJ45 wall jack? Is it into a concentrator? Is it a 66 block? Is it directly into the switch? Or is it a 110 block? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please don't answer in the chat room or give us any hints in the chat room. We're all going to pretend we're sitting there for the exam right now. We have no resources available. We're not Googling this, everybody. No Googling. We are instead going through this and absolutely thinking about the answers and taking a guess. That's one thing you should absolutely do. If you don't know the answer, take a guess. This is also important on your exam. As far as we know, from what we've been able to tell, you are not penalized for getting a question wrong. They apparently do not take points away from you if you get a question wrong, but you do get points if you get a question right. So it behooves you. It is to your advantage to answer every possible question that you can, even if you don't know the answer, because there's a chance you could just, through blind luck, get that answer somehow. And maybe most of the time it's an educated response after all. Maybe you get it down to the difference between 2 or 3 different options. You're getting rid of others. You're simply making that a better percentage chance for yourself. So that'd be another thing to think about as you're going through this. So let's see how we did with this one. We've got a company building out a new floor of a building, running network cables from each desk to the IDF. How should these wires terminate in the IDF? 49% of us said a 110 block. 22% of us said an RJ45 wall jack. 18% said directly into the switch. And then we got single digits. 8% said into a concentrator, and 4% said a 66 block. Well, this is the challenge that you will have with really building out any infrastructure in a facility. You've got all these people out on the floor. They're in their tiny little cubes. How do they even get out? Can they squeeze out to get out to the hallway They're not allowed to go to the restroom. It's a horrible work environment, but there it is. You've got your cubes and everybody's out there, and they all have computers on their desk, and they all are wired back to an IDF. This IDF is usually a closet on a floor, and that IDF can really help you out by trying to centralize everything that would be used on that particular floor. So this is one where you're coming back, and usually right in that IDF is a patch panel. So you're making this first run from everybody's desk into, very commonly with Ethernet, a 110 block, which is our answer in this particular case. That 110 block can either have a punch-down connection on one side. Sometimes it can have a punch-down connection on the other side. It's increasingly common to see a punch-down connection on one side of the 110 block and perhaps even RJ45 on the other. So you can wire up everybody's workstation to the different switches that may be in that IDF. This IDF is that intermediate data frame, the intermediate spot between the user and the IDFs usually connect to the MDF, which is the central data center type connection. Now, the beauty of having this patch panel in the middle is that sometimes people they'll move in and out of a desk. They'll leave the organization. Somebody new will come in. That new person will be in a different part of the organization, a different department, and they need to connect to different interfaces. So it's very common to take one of those connections, and if you need to move it, you can move it back from one of those switches to another by simply unplugging and plugging in again. So there's a good example of doing that, where we take this connection that's going to this top switch. Well, instead of moving a lot of cables and moving things around for the user, we simply grab that same patch cable and we move it to a different switch. So those patch cables in that IDF are usually quite short, maybe even less than a foot in some cases. So it's easy just to patch them in to the new place they need to be. That's why we have that patch panel there. It makes changes and updates to the network so much easier to deal with. The 110 block itself it looks like that right there. There it is. Used to be that we use a 66 block. These days, we are patching the higher category cables, and it needs the additional features available in a 110 block to maintain the signal that's going through those. So we have lots of wires that we're plugging in and punching down on these blocks. And usually on the other side is where the RJ45 happens to be. In some cases, you would have RJ45 that fits on top of that plugs into those connections. So it usually has that. The patch panel is usually in the IDF. That's usually in the same, you have all of these wires coming back to a single closet on a floor. That single closet is the IDF. And in that IDF, we usually have a rack. There's most often there is all of your switches in that rack. Your patch panel is in that room. Sometimes there's other services in that room that are specific to a floor. If that floor has its own telephone systems, maybe the call server that you're using in your environment, maybe that's in that building or in that IDF room. Maybe they've got servers that are in that room that are specific to devices on that floor. What we generally try to do is put all of the services in the data center so that they're centralized, and we only put the bare minimum into the IDF. Most of the time, that bare minimum is going to be your networking equipment. So it's going to be your switches that allow you to connect the users to their desks. And it will usually have the main distribution frame down to the data center. The MDF being that main, I being the intermediate distribution frame. That's what those terms are. They're weird names, distribution frames. Who knows where that came from? That's what we call them these days. It's one of those cases where we rarely call it the main distribution frame and the intermediate distribution frame. It's usually the IDF and the MDF. So you'll get used to people not saying the actual name. They'll just use the acronym these days. So the 110 block is what you would find in the IDF that you're connecting the users to. The 48% of you that shows E, that's absolutely correct. You would not use an RJ45 wall jack. Can you imagine having 200 users on a floor and you have 200 RJ45 wall jacks that are up on the right out of the wall that are inside the IDF? It's a relatively difficult thing to manage. It takes up way too much room. You wouldn't do that. So that's not what you would use inside the IDF. You would probably not run directly into the switch. You certainly could run directly into the switch, but every time you needed to make a change, you have to take the very long cables that are coming into that room and being able to unplug and try to find a way. It's very difficult to manage that many cables when you have hundreds and hundreds of wires coming into the room. So your patch panel will save you a lot of grief and a lot of trouble because everybody is locked in to that single patch panel, and all you move is a cable that's maybe a couple of feet long. Really saves you a lot of time and a lot of trouble. Would not be going into a concentrator. Concentrators generally are, there's two uses of the word concentrator networking. We can think of an IPsec concentrator, which is used for tunnels as an endpoint for a tunnel. That doesn't really apply here. Back in the day, we had Ethernet concentrators. That's not something you hear about these days. Only an old guy like me would remember Ethernet concentrators. That doesn't apply in this case either, so it would not be a concentrator. And last option here is 66 block. We stopped using 60 to 66 block when we started using Cat5, Cat6 cables. We needed a block that would give us a patch panel that would give us better performance and better coverage of the signals coming through, and that's why we use a 110 block. So those are the 5 options. If you did answer E, 110 block, you got it absolutely right. That is the right answer for this one. Well, as you can imagine, there's so much information on these exams. I have all of this detail that you need to know in every single one of my videos, and I highly recommend you get a good book, you watch these videos, you take some notes. But of course, there are tons of videos to watch, lots of information in these videos, plenty of things to go through. What I've done is take all of this information that is in my videos, and I've made my own set of notes from them. Let's see if I can pull these up on my screen. I don't even have them available here for you to see. I think I should show you what this happens to be. These course notes will give you all of the details of the information that is in my videos. So all of the things that you've been watching in my videos with all of those acronyms, all of the images, all of the details. Here are the course notes. You can see they are 66 pages long, and they have all of the details for protocols, for the structure of what we have. This is all directly from my videos. They are numbered with my video configurations. They've got all of the images. So if you're trying to figure out the difference between LANs and VLANs and trunking, it's all in here. It comes directly from the videos. It's a great thing to work along with the videos. This is not something you would grab and this would be your only resource. This is something that helps you remember what you watched in the videos in one single summary, one 66-page summary of this. And that might be something that can help you with this. You can even purchase this and download it. It helps keeps the lights on here. For those of you that have asked, can I help support what you're doing? I want to give you something back for your money. And I think these course notes not only help you, but it also helps keep us making more videos and more training materials here as well. Well, now you've got 2 of me on the screen. Let's show you what we got way too much of me on the screen. I wanted to show you there's a book version of this as well. Some of you like a book, a physical version, so you can purchase either the digital version or the physical version. It's exactly the same information. It's full color. It's a perfect bound softback book. So it's one that I will ship to you. And when you buy this physical version, you get the digital version available for free. It's another thing you can work through if you're trying to figure out how can I get my hands on this. We just go to professormesser.com/NPCN or professormesser.com/NPCN7, and it will take you to the Network Plus course notes. Plus, there's links on the video index page. There's links on the pull-down menus. You'll be able to find it on the website. So it comes in handy to have those notes available sometimes. Maybe that can help you as well when you're trying to work through them. Let's get some more questions in. I've been talking a lot in this study group, so let's get at least a couple more in. Wouldn't that be nice? I have another performance-based question for you to be able to run through this. The performance-based question asks, a server administrator would like to configure multiple network connections on a server to provide aggregate bandwidth and redundant paths. Which of these technologies would be the best choice? Would it be load balancing, RAID, NIC teaming, clustering, or active standby? So our question is that a server administrator would like to configure multiple network connections on a server to provide aggregate bandwidth and redundant paths. Which of these technologies would be the best choice? Would it be load balancing, RAID, NIC teaming, clustering, or active standby. Those are your 5 options. If you think you know those options, you can go to professormesser.com/QA and give me your answer. What do you think would be the best choice for what you're trying to do? This is a very common situation you'll be in as a network administrator, where you've been given a particular set of requirements. In this case, you would like to configure multiple network connections on a server, provide aggregate bandwidth and redundant paths, and they say, make that happen. You say, well, I happen to know the perfect technology to use to solve this issue, and it is one of those answers. One of those answers that happens to be there. Which one is it? How could that work? In the chat room, folks are asking how long shipping takes for a physical copy. Usually, if you are in the continental United States, it takes about a week, usually less than a week, but I like to say a week. International shipping obviously can take 2 to 4 weeks. You never know what's going to happen internationally or with the postal service that is on the other side of the border. That's usually up to them, has to go through customs. There's more things that happen there. So there's differences depending on where you are in the world, but I ship everywhere. I just throw it out there. I stick the postage on, it makes its way to you. It's a simple thing. And it works pretty well. So if you're in the United States, it works exceptionally well. If you're outside the United States, international shipping is great in some countries and not great in others. So that's more of an issue for the postal services to deal with, but I'll give it a shot anyway. Sometimes we get lucky and we get it through. Most of the time it's not a problem. Only rarely do I really run into an issue with international shipping. And it's usually to somewhere that's probably you would think you would run into problems with international shipping. For most countries, though, it's not an issue at all. Let's see how we did with this one. A server administrator would like to configure multiple network connections on a server to provide aggregate bandwidth and redundant paths. Which of these technologies would be the best choice? This is an interesting challenge because there are 2 different things that we're trying to solve here. We're trying to solve aggregate bandwidth, and we're trying to solve redundant paths. So this is one where we really do need to break this thing down. Let's see how we answered this one. We are torn. We are almost perfectly divided for number 1 and number 2. 41% of you said load balancing. 37% of you said NIC teaming. So this is one where it drops off right after that. 10% of you said active standby. 9% of you said RAID. And 5% of you said clustering. Well, now we're in this interesting situation where we have to solve both of these problems, aggregate bandwidth and redundant paths. And this is where, under normal circumstances and thinking about what the best choice would be for this, only one of them really makes the most sense in this scenario, and it's NIC teaming. When you're talking about a server type scenario, where you have a server that has multiple interfaces on it, and you would like, of course, there to be aggregate bandwidth. Imagine having a single connection coming out that's a gig connection. Well, if I have 2 connections, well, that's effectively doubling the bandwidth. What if I have 4 different Ethernet connections on the back of that server? We're effectively increasing our bandwidth by 4. So you could have up to a 4 gig connection. If it's 10 gig connections, a 40 gig connection. You can really increase all of those different pieces of it. Another nice thing about NIC teaming is you have the option for redundant paths, which means the connections that are coming out of the server could be going to completely different locations. And that's perhaps one of the biggest advantages of the NIC teaming that is different than perhaps some of the other options that we had available. Let's look at what those might be. These different adapters, if you were to look at the operating system, when you team them together, they look like one big adapter whenever you're looking at the configuration of them. Obviously, physically, in the physical world, they are separate individual links that are coming out of your server. And these links are usually talking to each other. It's very common, for example, to take NIC teaming, have one connection go to one switch, have the other connection go to a completely different switch. And there's your redundancy. And this also is where we get outside the scope of what traditionally we see with load balancing, which is one of these things that you have on the screen, which is plain old load balancing would effectively take all of those connections and plug it into a single switch. Now, there are some load balancing for those of you that are reading into this and thinking, but wait, there are load balancing configurations on my Cisco that allow me to use multiple switches. Yes, there are. Those are well outside the scope of the conversation that we're having with this particular question. I think everything in networking has a yes, but associated with it. Again, we're looking at these questions, and you should look at these questions on the exam as their own single self-supported question. You're working within the scope of the question and the answers that are provided. And that's why the question specifically asks, which of these technologies would be the best choice? Which one fits best to be able to configure multiple network connections and aggregate bandwidth with redundant paths? So you've got a couple of things there that you're having to deal with. And that's why the aggregate bandwidth, I'm with you from a load balancing perspective. It's when you have redundant paths where you run into an issue. So that is where you really have to think about, well, redundancy. I can plug one connection into one switch and one connection into another. There's my redundancy. They're obviously in the same VLAN. But now if the switch disappears, if the power supply goes out on the switch, which are real things, you have to think about that from the engineering perspective. If I lose the power supply in a switch, that switch will stop operating. But if I'm connected to a different switch, I've still got redundancy. I'm still up and running. In fact, people may not even know that that switch went down because I'm still up and running with my NIC teaming configuration. This is one. Whenever I start to get through these, this is not... And I know people, you get very frustrated some of these questions sometimes that you think it's a trick, but it's not. It's a difference in the actual definition of what these technologies are and what these technologies do. And the question I wrote was extremely specific. And the questions you get on your exam will also be extremely specific. And I think a lot of people get concerned that the specificity of the question is an issue. Like they're giving you way too much information to be able to do this. In this particular case, I'm giving you exactly the information you need to be able to make the answer here. And you have to parse out what these things are. So there is a level of reading and parsing that you have to do. Well, that is any certification exam that you will ever run into in our industry, most industries, that there's a lot of parsing that you have to do to find out exactly what the requirements are. In fact, a lot of the questions you get on the exam may give you information that does not apply to this. It may ask about other things that are outside the scope of NIC teaming, but it's important that you know the differences in those two things. And in fact, both load balancing and NIC teaming are in your CompTIA exam objectives. So make sure you're very familiar with those two technologies and what the differences happen to be. I didn't give you an option didn't have time here to give you the breakdown in my video of what these are. But you can always go to the video that is in section 3.2 under availability concepts is the name of the video. And I've got images there and network designs, and you can see the differences in those two things. You can break it down. Some of you are using the CompTIA Cert Master CE to do your renewals of your certification these days. But for those of you that are still collecting continuing education units, you can, of course, use this webinar as a 1-hour credit towards that webinar category CEU. I will also, just as another validation that you were here, I can send you an email that I digitally sign that says you must have watched this because you followed these specific instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link at the top or the bottom. In there, you will need to put a subject line, if you would be nice enough to put that this is the June 2019 Network Plus Study Group. And if you could put the super secret code word of the month in there, which is NIC teaming. We'll do the correct answer for this one, NIC teaming. In there, that'll be our secret code word of the month. You can do this whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this on the replay. You can also, of course, in there, put your name, put your email address so I can send you back the email. And you can, of course, put anything else in that note that you would like as well. I read through all of these. I'm not able to respond back to all of them. I just get too many of them. I wish I could. But you're welcome to put anything else in there. I do read through every single one of them. So that's a good way to, I will send you back an email probably in a week or so, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. And you will be able to get an email from me that says you must have been here to be able to do that. My public key is available on all of the major public key servers that are out there. at james@professormesser.com. But you don't send me, unless you'd like to send me information, you can, of course, send me an encrypted message using PGP or GPG. Either one works for me. So that's the challenge we have with this answer. Hopefully you were able to break those things down. I highly recommend you go through and have a look at the differences in the NIC teaming versus just a simple load balance. It is a little bit different in being able to provide that redundancy that you don't have in a traditional load balancing configuration. We got time for another question, so let's get through one more before we get through that today. Let's go through these pieces of this. This question asks, here we go. A security administrator would like to prevent someone from unplugging a desktop computer from their desk and connecting a different computer. Well, that never happens. I wonder why they're worried about that. Which of these features can be configured on the switch to prevent this from occurring? Would it be captive portal, ACLs, SSID broadcast suppression, port security, or VLANs? A security administrator would like to prevent someone from unplugging a desktop computer from their desk and connecting a different computer. Which of these features can be configured on the switch to prevent this from occurring? Would it be captive portal, ACLs, SSID broadcast suppression, port security, or VLANs? It's got to be one of those, right? As being able to have that capability. This is, everybody's trying to parse out the last question, load balancing versus NIC teaming for that. LACP for now. I don't know if NIC teaming really applies as LACP for NICs. LACP is a protocol used often to be able to do load balancing. It almost implies you're saying that NIC teaming is load balancing. That's not, yeah, kind of, sort of. Think of it as being able to take the idea of load balancing and spread it across multiple switches. That's really one of the best ways to think about NIC teaming from the perspective of that last question we asked. There are other advantages to NIC teaming as well that go, especially when you're talking about an individual device. Although I have a network attached storage device that does support load balancing with the different interfaces on the back of the device. So sometimes you'll see that directly to a switch from a device. Have those there. It does come in handy. So let's see if we know the answer on this one. A security administrator would like to prevent someone from unplugging a desktop computer from their desk and connecting a different computer. I would say that's a pretty valid concern. I would say that's a pretty good thing to be able to do that. No, NIC teaming is not like a team of load balancing. No, I know. You're reading more into that. Go check the video. That will help you quite a bit. Is the answer captive portal, ACLs, SSID broadcast suppression, port security, and VLANs? Let's see how we did with this one. We have 57% of you chose port security, 33% of you chose ACLs, and then single digits from there. Drops all down to 4% for captive portal, 4% for SSID broadcast suppression, and 1% for VLANs. I thought VLANs did everything. I think VLANs were the ultimate answer. Apparently, only one of us thought that was the case, because the answer here, the 58% of you that chose port security, that is the right answer. Port security, a very generic term to describe this particular function, but it's one that in the industry we pretty much describe this function as port security. I think a Cisco switch is probably one of the most prominent ones that describes this as port security. There's nuances, of course, associated with this, but it allows you to associate a MAC address with an interface. You can either be the first MAC address it happens to see, or you can hard code that MAC address into the configuration of the switch. So every single interface on that switch now has its own unique rule for who can connect to that particular interface. Does come in handy to be able to have that functionality. And this is the capability that means that if you were to unplug your computer and you bring in a laptop from home, you plug in your laptop from home, it won't work. Has a different MAC address associated with it. You can, of course, set other parameters on this. There's a lot of flexibility. Maybe you have 2 or 3 devices that are allowed on an interface, but nobody else. You can decide if a device plugs in and doesn't match, maybe it's allowed to work, but it sends you a message that somebody did this. Or maybe it stops working completely to have that functionality. So that's one that does come in handy to have that there. One of the other options, let's break through these different options there. Port security, clearly the option there. 33% of you did choose ACLs. Access control lists are generally considered to be a layer 3 function that you would find in a layer 3 device like a router. ACLs are not generally, the ACL functionality is not one that you generally associate with a switch. And in this particular case, the feature that we're looking for is port security is the actual feature on the switch that does this. ACLs usually also have to be predefined, so you would have to know beforehand what the exact MAC address was that you were looking for and have that configured in the switch from the very beginning. Whereas something like port security is smart enough to say, I'll take the first MAC address I see, that's the one I'll lock in for that interface, and nobody else is able to connect to have those things there. So that's why you have those differences in the capabilities. ACLs certainly, I think most people consider them to be at a higher level. There are certain devices that can do ACLs at a MAC address level, but MAC addresses and being able to manage at the MAC address level is so cumbersome that it's not something we commonly do in practice. It would be so involved. Can you imagine changing out all of your ACLs every time somebody changes their computer? You'd have to have a person that did nothing more than that. ACLs, by putting them at layer 3, you get a lot more flexibility, a lot more manageability, and less administration you'd have to deal with. And that's why whenever you see ACL, we're often talking about a layer 3 and IP address or higher in dealing with those. Captive portal. A captive portal is the message that comes up on your screen that asks you to log into a network, usually a wireless network. You often see this if you're in a coffee shop before you're able to use the internet. It presents to you a splash page that says, thank you for being here. By clicking this, you agree to our terms of service. So that would not apply in this case. And SSID broadcast suppression is the capability on a wireless router that lists out the available wireless networks. And if you suppress that, it doesn't show up in your list. That's another thing that can be useful on wireless networks. But for this question, has nothing to do with what we were doing. And VLANs, as useful as VLANs are for segmenting a network, they do nothing for providing security of individual interfaces on a physical switch. So that is one that does not apply here. The best possible answer here, the only one that really does apply, is indeed D, port security. That is the answer we were looking for and the one that is correct for this particular option. Every single one of these questions we went through today and everything that you'll be asked on the exam come directly from the exam objectives. If you're ever trying to figure out what do I do to study for my exam, what should I really be studying? What port numbers are really within the scope of the ones I need to know? People have come to me and said, I've got these 3 pages of 150 port numbers I've been studying. Boy, it's sure taken me a long time. But in reality, the port numbers on the exam are all listed for you in section 1.1. Those are the only ones you need to know for the exam. That's set right there. What is it, 20, 18? It's not a lot in the big scheme of things. Most of these you already know, or you should anyway, if you've been working with networks for a while. So you don't have to study 150 port numbers. You only need to know what's in this list. CompTIA gives you a detailed overview of everything you need to know to be able to answer these questions on the exam. And they really do stick very closely to the exam objectives. If you know everything in the exam objectives, you're going to do fine on your exam. And again, you can get those exam objectives directly from the CompTIA website. You can go to Google and type in CompTIA exam objectives, or you can go to professormaster.com/objectives, and I will redirect you over to that site as well. Can you believe it's been an hour of questions and answers? We'll do another one of these question and answer hours on July 17th. Come back next month. I'm skipping a week for those of you used to doing this the second Wednesday of the month, or even just a Wednesday. You know, this month was a little crazy with the scheduling, but we have, of course, another Network Plus study group on Wednesday, the 17th of July. We're skipping that first week because here in the United States, we have Independence Day on the 4th. So we're giving everybody a week off. We're going to start with our A Plus the week after that. Network Plus will be in the 17th, Security Plus on the 24th. I actually have Security Plus in a couple of days. So if you want to come back in 2 days on Thursday, if you're watching this live, we can, of course, talk about what we're doing with Security Plus in a couple of days. We'll get that in before the end of the month, which would be fantastic to do that. Well, don't stick around. We've got another hour or so, more or less, of questions coming directly from you. You can ask questions in the chat room, which a number of you are already doing, We'll discuss what those questions are. I'll open up the phone lines, and you can call in with your question if you would like to. That's something you can do. Don't forget about our I have a Network Plus question of the week available that I tweet out every Tuesday. In fact, that should be going out shortly today. Actually, it already did. Went out about 20 minutes ago. You can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter. Of course, all of my Network Plus videos are available on the YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about the course notes available at professormesser.com/NPCN. And we've got, of course, the calendar. If you're watching this on a replay and you're wondering when's the next live event of these, you can find the live event on the calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll be able to see that as well. Thanks for sticking around the first hour. Stick around for the second hour. We'll do the after show. I appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay, we've got, let's see if I can click a few buttons on my side and get the phone lines up and running, and then I'll answer some of the questions from the chat room, and we'll go through a few of those things as well. I guess I should. This will take a moment on my side to plug in a few things. I'm the only one here, so I don't have a producer that's sitting here that gets the show going. You have to deal with me getting all of these buttons pushed on my side. So let's see if we can get all of these going. I'm going to go to my Skype. I'm going to click on a few things and call into my own show. How does that work? I know. It's a little crazy.
Thank you for calling.
All right. We'll type in these numbers here, and we'll hit a pound sign.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, sure. I will do that, and it will say,
welcome.
There we go. So that gets us into getting things going, which means that you are welcome to call in. This is a toll-free number in the continental United States, or you can call in at 855-785-RJ45, and you can call in and ask any question you would like. I'm also taking questions from the chat room, so you can go to the chat room at professormesser.com/live if you are here indeed live, and I'll answer your questions from there as well. If you're anywhere else in the world outside of the continental United States, you can use Skype to call in absolutely free, no Skype minutes required. I will pick up the tab by hitting a +1 at the beginning of that phone number. +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in there as well to ask any question you would like. Let's take some questions from the chat room. So a few of you asked in that last question, I was talking about port security, and I was talking about ports, and I was talking about interfaces. And you'll notice I use the term interface a lot instead of using the term port. And in fact, someone in the chat room was asking, well, aren't ports and interfaces the same thing? Well, if you're only talking about the physical connection on the front of a switch where you would plug in an RJ45 cable, you can call that an interface, or you can call it a port. Both of those terms are applicable. The problem with networking is there are other places where we use the term port. In fact, prior to the end of the study group, I talked about you knowing your port numbers. Well, those port numbers are not the interfaces that you would connect an RJ45 cable to on the front of a switch. A port number is a completely different animal that has a lot of things different associated with it. So that's why whenever I talk about switches and I talk about the physical connection on a switch or a router, you very often will hear me using the term interface, so that it has that connotation of being a physical interface, a physical connection on that device. And that's why I try to make that delineation in those two things. And that's why whenever I talk about ports, I talk about port and use port numbers, and I'm connecting to port 443 and HTTP is port 80. And whenever we're talking about ports, I'm really using that term port differently, although it's absolutely appropriate to use the term port when you're referring to those interfaces on a switch as well. I just do it a little bit differently because the people listening in to me often are just learning these terms. So you do want to run into that. Let me check this videos page real quick. One moment. Get some of this. Just need to move some things around here. Here we go. So another question in the chat room, then we'll go to some of the calls that are coming in. Will I be creating a quiz booklet similar to what I've done for A+? My plan is to create some Q&A. I don't know that it will be exactly the same exact style as the A+ pop quiz collection that I've done. I think a lot of people have said that you wanted more of an actual exam simulation so that you could get more feedback on, am I ready to take this exam? So I think what I'm planning to create probably would be more along those lines. And I am planning that. Time frames, though, is always the challenge, isn't it? Now that my A+ video course is complete, I am planning to shift gears and create some additional content that we can supplement the videos with, including some Q&A. I don't have a specific date. I don't have any time frames yet, but I am planning to create something. I think that would be useful for a number of folks to have available. So I would like to have that. That's on my list. I have a very big list. And I would like to do another video course. And maybe that's a good place to go to get your feedback. If you think you know what video course you would like to see next, I'd love to get your input on that as well. That's one, whenever I try to figure out what am I going to do next, it's a big list. There's a lot of things that I have to think about whenever I'm trying to figure out where am I going with this? What is the next thing to do? What do people want to see? I'm guessing a lot of the time. I'm taking your feedback. I get your constant feedback, but it's not usually something where I'm asking you, but you're more than welcome to tell me of a particular course and what you would like to see. So that can become useful to have those things and those capabilities there. I don't know, for those of you asking about the quizzes and those types of things, I don't have any plans to do anything electronic. I do have plans to do this as a PDF, but I think it's going to be a traditional book format for these questions. I don't think I'm going to do an app. Maybe I'll change my mind with that, but I'm not leaning that way right now to have those capabilities there, to have that functionality. Yeah, CCNA is a popular request. I do have some Cisco materials available today, and my course notes for the ICND 1. Of course, they've been out for a couple of years. And as some of you are probably familiar, Cisco is changing the format and style of their certification program. So that's happening soon. So it's a good opportunity, time-wise, to create some content that would be specific for some of these Cisco exams. I don't know if that's quite what I want to do yet, but we'll see for those. Is there any Cisco CLI syntax, the command line interface syntax, on the Network Plus exam? I have seen a number of online Q&A websites that ask Cisco CLI questions, and I don't know why. They are nowhere listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Nothing relating to the Cisco CLI is part or is in scope for the Network Plus exam objectives. There are some Cisco technologies that are in the Network Plus exam objectives. Things like, I guess, TACAX is considered to be a Cisco technology, although there is some standardization where other people can use that these days. Port security, that's a term Cisco uses to describe that security function on their switches. But the exact CLI commands are pretty well outside the scope. Don't focus on that. Don't worry about CLI for your Network Plus exam. If it's not in the exam objectives, I would not worry about it. Now, the converse of that is that CompTIA can ask you anything they want on the exam. They even say this in the exam objectives, that this is a list, but we could go outside this list. And that's perfectly within their right to do so. It's their exam, and they can ask you anything else. What I have found is that they stick very closely to the exam objectives. So if you know the exam objectives, you're great. Even if for a question they go outside the scope of that, big deal. You know everything else. You'll do fine on the exam. Now, if you were shooting for that perfect score, I guess we all should be shooting for the perfect score. But if you were hoping to get that perfect score on the exam, they might throw a wrench in there. They might mess the whole thing up for you. So don't worry about that too much. Try to focus on what they are focused on, which are that comprehensive list of exam objectives. It's really the place to go if you're trying to know. That's why in the chat room, people asking, so are there cloud computing questions on the exam? There are. They talk about cloud computing on Network Plus. It's in the exam objectives. Let me pull up the exam objectives just so you get the perspective of this, so you understand exactly what they are asking about. So I'm going to pull up my Network Plus exam objectives, and we're going to view them. Mine are a little annotated, but it should help you get a perspective of what I have here. Let's stick my face on this so you can see it. So here's my exam objectives. Let's go to the first page. So in fact, this is where they talk about this exam, what these exam objectives are for. They expect you to have, well, that wasn't what I was trying to do. They expect you to have 9 to 12 months of work experience in IT, networking specifically. They talk about their acceptable use policy. They say, please note, the lists of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists. Other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may be included on the exam, although not listed or covered in this objectives document. CompTIA is constantly reviewing the content of our exams and updating test questions to be sure our exams occur and the security of the exams is protected. When necessary, we'll publish updated exams based on existing exam objectives. Please know that all related exam prep materials will still be valid. So they try not to go outside the scope of that, which is good. That's what I would like to see as well. They tend not to change the exam objectives in the middle of everything that's going on. But the exam objectives are detailed. Now, my exam objectives I have here are colored. Just ignore these colors that I have. I color code these based on what my videos have in them. So everything that's green is the same content as the older version of the exam, the N10006. So when I started creating the new videos, I was highlighting this and have those there. Anything that's yellow is new. So things like in section 1.3, the concept of protocol data units and MTUs, as odd as that would have not been on a previous exam, wasn't. So it was new. Things like dual stack, router advertisements, and neighbor discoveries were new, mostly because that sounds very IPv6-ish, doesn't it? So that's where you'll see some of those things occur. Some of the newer technologies like Z-Wave, ANT+, RFID, although that's not really new, but those were things added new in this version of the exam. So go through this list. You can see it's comprehensive. I'm only up to section 2 at this point. Next page, all of section 2, section 3. Anything is purple in here, for those of you wondering. The purple is the topic was in the last version of the exam, but they built it out a little more for this exam. So it was giving me the heads up that you need to add more content there. So I updated that content. Everything is updated. I go through every slide when I update these videos, add some context, remove some things that are confusing, make them a little clearer, and in some cases add a lot more detail with some of those, including, interestingly enough, NIC teaming, port aggregation, clustering, load balancing, high availability, fault tolerance. It turned out to be its own video. So that's how I was able to do that and have those things there. So that's where that came from. That's what all those different pieces are and why they are there, and everything else that you would run into. That's why I made them that way. So if you're trying to figure out, is this topic on the exam? Is that topic on the exam? Should I study for this? It's all in those exam objectives. That's why I tell you over and over and over again how important those objectives are, because that will tell you everything you need to know. Another question in the chat room. Would it be possible to get something like the YouTube training videos as a podcast? I don't have them available as a podcast because I make them available as downloadable MP3 files. So this is something that you can purchase to help support the site. So you can watch the videos for free. You can even technically listen to the videos in your car, but if you want an MP3 version of these, it's something that you can purchase from the website. I'll also tell you that these are incremental purchases. So if you purchase the course notes, you can upgrade to the audio version of the course without having to buy it straight out. You get a credit for what you've already purchased. And then after that, if you wanted to buy the videos, you get a credit for everything you've previously purchased as well. and you can upgrade. There's an upgrade link that's inside your member login that allows you to do that. So that's one of those. I don't think CompTIA allows me to share this coded version of my exam objectives. I've thought of perhaps creating an HTML version of this that would have the codes in them. I don't know how valid this really is because I don't think anybody else at this point, it's over a year since the N10006 was around. I don't think that anybody is in the position where they have to know the difference between these at this point. It's a set of information that quickly loses its value as time goes on. So I can't imagine anybody right now is saying, well, I studied for the N10006. That's like a year and 3 months ago. So probably don't, we're past the window of having those things available, I think, for this. So another question, this was one that has come up recently. I got an email about this a couple weeks ago in the chat room. The question, is there generally opportunity before the exam timer starts to write out information such as a subnetting chart? So those of you that have never taken one of these exams before, they will give you, generally it's a single page of a glossy paper. It's a laminated sheet. Usually it's about 8.5 by 11. So it's a standard size sheet of paper that has been laminated so that they can give you an erasable marker, and you can use that erasable marker to write things on this piece of paper during your exam. In fact, one of the tips I give you in my 7-second subnetting video is to bring your own erasable marker, because they give you like one of these big fat markers that you would use to make a poster. I don't know what they're thinking. Why would you give someone that marker and you're giving them a single 8.5 and 11 sheet of paper? That doesn't make sense. So I tell people to buy your own erasable marker that has a fine tip point on it, so you can write like a normal human being would write. Testing centers, you're not helping. So this fine tip marker would allow you to write very detailed information and be able to read it on this piece of paper. The question, though, is that do you have an opportunity before the exam timer starts to write things on the paper? And based on the CompTIA exam rules and regulations, you do not. You must start the exam, and only then are you able to write things on this piece of paper. That is how it's supposed to be done. I have been in test centers myself where I have written things on that piece of paper before the exam started, not understanding that that wasn't how it was supposed to be done. I only recently really went back and looked at the rules. Did that one backwards, admittedly. But I was writing things down before actually starting the exam, because one of the things you get at the beginning of the exam is you have to read through the CompTIA exam candidate agreement, which means you have to agree that you're not going to tell other people about the exam materials. You're not going to cheat on the exam. You're going to be a good person. You're going to be nice. I don't know. There's a lot of things in there. But one of the things that you'll find in that list is you can't start doing anything until the timer starts, except they give you like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go through this. So I was using that 15 minutes to write things down, and only then agreeing to the candidate agreement and then starting the exam. Well, I've noticed a lot of people have told me that the exam centers have gotten very strict about this. They must have sent out a memo and said, no, don't allow people to write things down until the timer starts. Well, that sort of defeats the whole thing. Darn it, because now I don't want to write things after the timer starts. I'm concentrating on getting the exam done. So maybe write very quickly whatever you have to write. And maybe that's the way to do it. So you are not supposed to get additional time before the exam timer starts to write out any information on that sheet of paper. No, you should not. So that's one of those things that you will run into. Would I say a few words about virtual circuits? It does mean a number of different things. In fact, there's probably an idea of virtualization or virtual circuits or virtual communication in practically any any type of technology. Just look at local area networks. There are virtual local area networks, VLANs. You will not see anybody talking about PVCs and frame relay ever anymore. We don't use frame relay anymore. If anybody's talking about PVCs and SVCs and frame relay, you're reading some very, very, very outdated materials. Nobody's really talking about that. But if there are some places where you see frame relay mentioned, and I guess that is a good example. I think, is it still in the exam objectives? I think they even put frame relay in there. They do. There's the concept of frame relay as a broad compare and contrast in the exam objectives for Network Plus in section 2.5. There's not a lot of detail, though. Nobody goes into detail about frame relay anymore because we talk about it as the legacy technology that is. There's probably somebody still running it somewhere in the world, but nobody uses frame relay anymore. The concept of having a virtual circuit or a virtual connection or a virtual interface or virtual LAN, probably kind of the same. I don't commonly see people talking about virtual circuits in the concept of TCP handshaking, though. I mean, there is that perspective that you are creating a connection based on port numbers that I guess you could describe as a virtual circuit. It seems like you're twisting around the language in order to meet somebody's need to talk very in these very broad terms, the very specific terminology. Why are you calling it a virtual? Nobody calls TCP connections virtual circuits. It's more of a TCP flow, a TCP connection. Nobody calls it a virtual circuit except books. People who write these books sometimes go a little bit further than probably they should. So virtual circuits, I guess the best comparison, PVC certainly applies. SVC, yeah, these books, I guess they have to fill room, right? They have to come up with some way to talk about a virtual circuit. Is the term virtual circuit even in here? Let's find out. Virtual IP, virtualization, virtual networking components, including virtual switches, virtual routers. That's sort of the cloud-based computing virtualization concept. Network device hardening, which is describes virtual routers, virtual switches, and that type of thing. A permanent virtual circuit, the PVC, is definitely a frame relay term, which is listed in the list of acronyms that is in the back of the CompTIA exam objectives, as is SVC, switched virtual circuit. Both of those are frame relay concepts that you will probably not run into, but the concept of virtual circuit in any other context is not mentioned anywhere in the CompTIA exam objectives. I would argue perhaps even knowing PVCs and SVCs as they relate to frame relay is a bit out of scope, but it's in the list, so it doesn't hurt to know those particular things. I agree. There are a number of books that talk about a number of technologies in a number of different ways. I'm giving you the perspective of these technologies as someone who has been a network administrator, a security administrator, someone who has designed networks, someone who has implemented networks and managed networks. We don't use the term virtual circuits to describe TCP handshaking. No, sorry, I had to laugh at that one. Nope, we don't. The video I described talking about a question in the chat room about the video describing NIC teaming, load balancing, and some of those concepts is in section 3.2. If you're ever trying to find the video I have of a thing, the numbers on my videos match the numbers from the exam objectives. So you can always go to the exam objective, see where that exam objective is listed, find the number, and there's usually one or a few videos associated with that number. And usually the name of the video gives you more detail, but the description of the video, I try to put some of those concepts in there. And you may realize, or may not realize, on my website, under each video is the transcript of the video. So you can actually read what I'm saying in the video. That is a human-generated transcript of what's there. I have people that will watch the video. They transcribe every word I say. As horrible as that sounds, it's as horrible as it is to read. But they create that as a transcript that I put on the page that is also created as closed captioning. So some of you that would like to have closed captioning in the videos, it's already there. And it's not the YouTube closed captioning. It's not that crazy computer generated, we think he said a virtual private network, and when he said banana, orange, or cucumber. No, that's not. It's not that kind. I get real people, human beings, that create the closed captions and put it into the video. So what I mean to say by this, they're really good closed captions. They're really good transcripts. So transcripts are I think a pretty useful thing when you consider that they are transcripts. Transcripts, you ever read through transcripts, it's not like reading a book because we don't talk like we write. But as long as you understand that, it's pretty useful to have that there and the concept of that. I think a lot of people said, oh, it's good. I can read through the transcript and know what's in this video, or English isn't your first language. You can read through the transcript, or networking is not your first language, because there's a lot of weird terms in networking. Sometimes you can see them written out and it helps a little bit. And that's under every single video on my site. Some of the newer A+ videos don't have them yet. I send them off. They go through them. It takes a number of weeks. I get them back. I put them on. But they all eventually will have that so that they're there. I do that for closed captioning. The transcript part is just a bonus from doing it. But I like to have every video closed captioned. There are people in my family that have hearing disabilities. So that's sort of a big thing for me, is to make sure that if anyone is ever watching these videos, that they could read it as well. I find it also helps if English is not your first language. A lot of people watch these videos from other countries where their first language is something else. English is a secondary language, but they can follow along a lot better if it's written on the screen as I'm saying it. So I like to do that with every single one of my videos. I think it adds value for you to be able to do that. It's incredibly expensive to do that. So all of these things that you're doing by supporting the website, purchasing the course notes, that's what it goes to doing. I think it makes a better product for everybody for those, and being able to have that there. One of the things I like to do is try to find different ways to make the videos better, or make them different, or be able to go through that. And I think that there's a good opportunity for you to be able to contribute to that as well. If there's something you would like to see, if there's a concept you would like to cover, I'm thinking about the idea of having other videos as supplemental videos that perhaps aren't specific to the exam, but can provide some additional context. I'm hoping that the study group videos do some of that. And I realize there's a lot of filler. We do some announcements at the beginning. It takes time after I ask the question to get to the answer of these. I get your emails about those things, but this is a live stream, and it's I think more of a casual live stream. If I wanted a strictly edited, tightly paced, formatted thing, this would be a completely different animal. This is more of something that I like to do because I think it's fun, and that I hope it provides some value as you're going through your studies. And that's another reason why I have the timestamps available a couple days after. So if you wanted to run through this in a matter of minutes and get through every question we went through and then go to the next video, you could do that. So you have the options there to have that. I would like to know the future of the CCENT certification, because next year I hear it won't be valid anymore. Well, that's not entirely true. The CCENT certification, which is the Cisco Certified Entry-Level Network Technician, they have completely phased out the Entry-Level Network Technician, or the ICND1 certification. So after next year, or whenever they implement it, I haven't even looked at it. I've been a little busy. But I've got to go back and see what their timeframes are for that. But they are getting rid of that cert. Now, if you earn that certification prior to them getting rid of it, you're still certified. They're just getting, any future test takers would not be able to take that cert. But if you already earned the certification, they don't take it away from you. You still have it. What they're doing is collapsing what used to be 2 exams to earn your CCENT routing and switching. And as I understand it, they're collapsing it into a single exam. That's a big exam. I don't know how they're going to do with that. I haven't seen the exam objectives yet. I always thought having it as two separate exams was always a good idea because it had such scope. It was a massive scope. I don't know how successful they will be at combining these things together. Maybe they're throwing some stuff out. I think you would have to, wouldn't you, on an exam that big, to have those capabilities. I'm not sure what those would be, to have that there. But it'd be important. I really need to go through that breakdown. It's a Cisco set of exams. There are a ton of people on YouTube that have already made their videos. They're like, here's what's new in the exam. Here's what's different. Here's what they're going to do. I'll go watch one of those. We'll see. Have one of those other people that have already gone through all the work. Tell me what the differences are, and then I can decide what I want to do from there and break all those pieces down. Or maybe I don't like any of their videos and I need to do my own of really what the differences are. Sometimes that happens too with those. So it's not that it won't be valid. I think employers eventually, now that they understand the CCENT is no longer available, they will stop asking for it on job descriptions. And I think from a career perspective, a lot of us are focused on that. We're tuned into that idea that we need to be able to get a job or get a better job. And to do that, we need to get the requirements that the employers are asking for. And if they are still asking for a CCNT, that's great. But a number of them will stop asking for it when they realize Cisco doesn't make one anymore. So you'll start to see that falling off. That's why it's important to know what people are looking for. Sometimes employers don't care that you have any certification. So there's opportunities there. Maybe you don't need to go through that path. That's one of the things I always tell people is that you shouldn't be taking the certification so that you can then use that towards something else. You should already know what that something else is. You should already know what that next step is, and you should have a list of all those requirements. And if one of those requirements is you get your Network Plus certification, that makes sense to get that certification. That's what you should be focusing on. That's the order you should go in to have all those pieces there. We have a question about the set. So what is the device next to my YouTube award? So I've got this, some of you are familiar, now I have to do this backwards. So this is the YouTube award right here. I'll put this on my, right here, this YouTube award it signifies that I got 100,000 subscribers on my site. Thank you for that, by the way. I'm very proud of that award. And now, of course, we're up over 300,000 subscribers. That was a couple of years ago when this came through. But it was a lot of hard work that created that plaque right there. And it's one of those that I couldn't do without your support. So if you're one of those people like you can't buy anything, you don't have the money to invest, you're enjoying the free videos, and I'm more than happy to make these for you, but you would like to give back in some way, subscribing to my channel. And you hear this all the time from YouTube creators, please subscribe. Well, that's because these subscriptions get a lot of visibility within the folks at YouTube. So thanks to you, I have a YouTube person I can talk to and ask questions of, and I get invitations to their YouTube events and learn more about what they're doing. And they're able to work with me on things that they are doing. You'll hear more about that probably by the end of the year. Some things I'm working with YouTube on. So wouldn't be able to do that without your support there. Right next to that is a picture of an Atari joystick from an Atari 2600 that one of my sons did when he was in, I think it was in elementary school, and I thought was awesome. So you can't see, it's kind of blurry now. The camera I have now doesn't have a long depth of field, but that's a pretty awesome picture. I should Instagram that one. It's so good. It's just been there for years, and I love having it. And underneath that, I think that's a Yaesu 747GX HF shortwave transceiver. I think that's the right model number. I think I'm talking correct there. I haven't plugged it in a while. I need to do that. But I haven't had a huge monster storm come through yet that I would need to get on my HF rig and start doing that. That's a ham radio rig, amateur radio here in the United States, federally licensed radio communication. So that's what that's device, not a networking device, oddly enough, to have those things up there. Do I have a networking device even up there? I don't really, do I? I have an electronic Rubik's Cube. I have a wireless Mac keyboard, which is actually a legitimate keyboard for the Mac that's in front of me. I just don't use it. I use this Microsoft keyboard. So the other keyboard sits back there. There is I can't remember if that's my LX motherboard or if it's from an Xbox. I think it's my LX motherboard. There's some cigars. There's an Apple Mac Cube, and there's a cricket bat. So there's the set. You got the whole breakdown of the set. Primarily because not a lot of calls coming in today. We're doing mostly questions from the chat room, which is I'm absolutely fine with. And there's plenty more coming through from the chat room as well. Let's get one of those questions from the chat room. Ask, can you use a layer 3 switch paired with a layer 2 switch to segregate different departments in a network? Yes. Well, let's break out what these different terms are, and then it should make more sense. So, as I have often said in my study groups and elsewhere, there is no such thing as a layer 3 switch. There isn't. The marketing people created a term called layer 3 switch, but a switch is layer 2, and something that's layer 3 is a router. So layer 3 and switch are two different things, and never the twain shall meet. A layer 3 switch in reality, of course, is the routing engine and a switch engine that have been crammed into the same chassis. That is a layer 3 switch in the terms of marketing. But what that really means is that part of this box that I'm plugging in has a router inside of it. The other interfaces and ports on the front of it are switch ports. So in a way, if you have a wireless router at home, that's a layer 3 switch. It's, if you want to use the same idea, that is what a layer 3 switch means. So let's break this out separately. If you see the term layer 3, let's call that routing or a routing engine or something that is doing routing. If you see anything that says layer 2, let's call that a switch, something that's doing switching. So a layer 2 device is a switch, is a device that makes forwarding decisions based on MAC addresses. A layer 3 device is a router. It's a component that makes its forwarding decisions based on an IP address. Now, if you see the term layer 3 switch, it's not that somehow we have magically turned switching into the ability now to do layer 3 at a switching level. No. All it means is that in this layer 2 device that is a switch, we also have code or hardware running that allows us to route. And they are actually two different commands with two different subsystems. They are programmed differently, they are developed differently, and they are configured differently. So that's one of the things you have to think about. You could just as easily cut that layer 3 switch in two, have the switch interfaces over here and the routing interfaces over there. All they really did was make it so we didn't have to plug in another box, and it squeezed it into the same box. That's what a layer 3 switch happens to be. So if you think about that and you're writing out a network diagram, can you use a layer 3 switch paired with the layer 2 switch to segregate different departments in the network? Well, yeah. Well, segregation actually occurs on the layer 2 device on the switch, where you would create one VLAN for the marketing department, one VLAN for shipping and receiving, and one VLAN for accounting. Now, none of those VLANs can talk to each other because they're on separate VLANs. Even they're on the same physical switch, we have programmatically configured them to be in their own little world, and they can't talk to each other. The only way they could talk to each other is if we ran some wires or configured a switch, those switch interfaces to somehow talk through a router. We need a router to be able to communicate between VLANs. We need a layer 3 device to be able to communicate between VLANs. That layer 3 device could be an external router. That's one way to do it. Or if you have routing functionality built into the same chassis, you could turn on that layer 3 functionality and say, let's connect up all those VLANs to this layer 3 router, and let's route traffic between these VLANs. And we could do that in the same chassis by using the layer 3 functionality that may be available in your particular chassis. So that's why whenever you say, can I use a layer 3 device to route between layer 2? Yeah, that's what a layer 3 device does. It's exactly what a layer 3 device does to be able to connect between those things. And you can either do that as an internal routing device in a layer 3 switch. You could do it as an external router in a standalone layer 3 router. Either way works because you're not layer 3 is layer 3 and layer 2 is layer 2. So if you break it out that way and you don't worry so much about the marketing terms, it makes a lot more sense when you're designing a network and trying to configure it properly. Where the layer 3 sits, where it lives in the physical world, is not as important as what it is doing at the logical level. And that's why we sort of draw our diagrams that way. Kind of comes in handy to have that there too. Do I have any plans on starting the CompTIA Cloud Plus certification? I don't. I don't get a lot of Cloud Plus questions coming in or Cloud Plus recommendations. It's a certification that for some reason has not gotten the same traction as some of the others. The content in that certification is perfectly valid. It's good to have some familiarity with cloud-based technologies, but doesn't seem to be something that the employers have caught on to and are adding to their list of things as a requirement. And that's what drives a lot of what I do. That doesn't mean that the Information Cloud Plus is any better or worse than any of these other certs. It's good content. It's just that I have to think about what are people trying to do. And my primary goal here is to have people get a job or get a better job. And so Cloud Plus probably doesn't fall very high, or it's not very high in that list. It's a little further down in that list to have that there. At this point, I've not seen a driving reason to include Cloud Plus. There are other cloud-based certifications I would probably put higher than that in my list for what I'm trying to accomplish. So something like the Amazon cloud-based certifications, those would probably go higher in my list. Some of the new Google certifications kind of go higher in my list. There's some cloud component associated with that. It's not a true cloud certification, but a lot of employers are kind of catching on to the value of that Google cert. It's kind of dropped off there lately. Haven't heard a lot about that. We'll have to see what's coming up before those. Another question that came in, would it be beneficial to get the Network Plus certification before going for Security Plus? And again, this is one where you have to turn it around. Why are you getting the Security Plus? Why are you getting the Network Plus? There's no order to this. There's no particular requirement that things be in a particular order, but why are you doing it? If you're somebody, and earlier on at the beginning of the study group, there were people connecting from Virginia, from DC, from Maryland, and almost always those are positions that have something to do with the United States federal government. That's where the federal seat is, obviously. The capital of our country is Washington, D.C., and all around that geographical area, a huge number of the jobs there have some association with the federal government, and a number of them more specifically with the Department of Defense. And as you probably are aware, there are a number of minimum IT certifications required to either work for or do business with the United States Department of Defense. One of the minimum certifications you would need would be Security Plus. That's to have a job in IT that has some association with Department of Defense, Security Plus. Network Plus doesn't count. Network Plus is not on that list of the minimum you would need. So if you were in that particular geographical area, you were trying to get a job with one of these service providers or manufacturers or partners of the Department of Defense or the federal government in general, Security Plus would probably be where you would start. And in fact, in my website, there are a number of people, their first IT certification is very often Security Plus. They don't have A+, they don't have Network Plus, and they have no interest in getting them. Because why would you? Employers don't care. They want Security Plus, and that's where they start. However, I've always said, and I feel this very strongly, if you're planning to move into a security role, like a pure IT security position, you need a very strong foundation in networking. We've already talked a little bit today about connecting up load balancing, redundancy, and when you get into IT security, you're connecting up firewalls. They're in high availability configurations. You're either plugging in at the layer 2 section of the network or the layer 3. Sometimes you're connecting at layer 1. How do you plug in and connect and have redundancy either in an active-active or an active-passive configuration? Both of those are dramatically different in how you would engineer the network. Often you have to deal with IP addressing. You have VPNs that you're configuring, IPsec VPNs between sites using those same firewalls. All of those have a very strong foundation in networking. The security part's almost secondary in that scenario. So having that networking knowledge is almost required. I can't see how you would do an IT security role and not already be an expert in networking. You really do have to be. And so in that context, maybe you should get Network Plus first. So it just depends on where you're coming from, where you're going to. It really is different for every single person. Everybody has their own path. Everybody has their own objective of where they're going next. Everybody lives in a different part of the country where the requirements are different. So I can't say there's any single answer for that one other than look at your specific situation, determine what your next step is going to be, and then see, do I need a cert for that? What cert would make the most sense to get the eye of that particular employer? So there's some benefits there for having that availability. So another question in the chat room. My long-term career goals relate to IT project/product management. Boy, those are two different things. Project management and product management, two completely different worlds. Do you think it would be better to get certs/work experience in IT and work my way up, A+, networking, etc., or get a basic solid understanding of IT and then focus on project management and jump in? You know, project management is a science unto itself. But one thing that is a universal truth with every project manager I've ever worked with is the more understanding they had of the underlying technology, the better they were at being able to manage the project, because they knew what comes next. They knew how long these things took. They knew the process that the folks would have to go through to be able to accomplish the goals of the project. And they understood financially, this is a big part of project management, how much is this going to cost? They understood financially what those differences were, sometimes down to a dollar level. They knew detailed what it was going to take to do some of these things. When you talk about, we just need to connect two sites together. Do you know what's even involved at making that happen? How are you going to do that? Is there a link in place already? Are we having to bring in additional circuits? There's a time frame associated with that and a cost, and we have to sign a contract. There's all kinds of things associated with that. If you already know the process, you can plan for it a lot better. And on top of that, project management has its own science of doing the actual project management piece. I would make a bad project manager. I'd be an awful project manager. I would have to first learn all the project pieces, and project management on its own is quite a challenge. But then I would have to somehow apply all the rest to it and still be able to tolerate it. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe my problem is not the understanding project management. It's being impatient. Maybe that makes bad project manager. That might be it, now that I think about it. The idea, and one of the things I found very intriguing in IT, is project management, the CFO. Those two positions are probably some of the most, or even an IT financial person. Those two roles are extremely influential at getting a project done. Is there a director of IT, a CIO? Yes, there is. And they're setting high-level goals and objectives. But to actually get things done, somebody has to say, okay, we're going to buy that, or no, we're not going to buy that. That's a pretty influential role. And the project manager, a good project manager, is one that works in conjunction with that financial side to really move things along. And somebody who's really good at that and understands it's more than just getting tasks done. It's about making all of these cogs work in conjunction with each other. That's a pretty important role. You wouldn't get any projects done without it. Product management is a completely different animal. Obviously, you'd be creating a product. It doesn't sound like a lot of what you were talking about there was product management. But that's a different role completely, where you are designing the concept of a product, and then creating some functional specifications that can then be used by developers and other parts of the teams to be able to create that product. And you're responsible for having that product process work along the way. It's probably even a second project manager who works in conjunction with the product manager to take the concept they wrote on paper and somehow turn it into an existing product that's in the real world. That particular role is a challenging one because that one has more that's a much higher level role. Product manager is a much higher role in the organization. Usually it's an executive level role. It's somebody who has a very strong understanding of the underlying technology because they have to make hard decisions about features, functions, and capabilities because all of those things are associated with a dollar value. Not just a dollar value to create, but a dollar value that someone would pay for the product. And then on top of that, they have to be a PR person. They have to be many times the face of the product to talk to consumers, to talk to potential purchasers. It's a much more challenging role than project management. But maybe you start project manager and then work into the product piece. Both interesting jobs, both jobs I would do badly at. And that's probably why I never did it. I don't know, in a way I do product management now. I am creating products and I am creating functional specifications, perhaps not as formal as you would have in a large organization, but I'm still writing down, here's how I want this product to look. Here's the features, the functionality, and the things I want to have there. So maybe there is a little bit of that there. Kind of the way it works in a role where you're trying to do entrepreneur type things. Another point here and a question that was made about, we were talking about amateur radio earlier. And interesting enough, they say the U.S. military gives enlistment bonuses for CompTIA certificates. Did not know that. That's interesting. But having your amateur radio license does help you more than a little, helps you a lot with understanding radio waves, bandwidth concepts, these concepts in wireless networking. I just kind of fell into them very easily because I already had my amateur radio license. I think I got it back after Andrew. What was that, 94? Hurricane Andrew, 96, when I lived in Miami. So I realized then we lost all our phones. We lost all communications. Everything was out. We lost all of our power. Cell phone towers. Cell phones were relatively new at that point. We were still running around with pagers. Some of us had cell phones. And the batteries ran out and they stopped working. Now what do you do when you have no communication whatsoever? So I got my amateur radio license, thought, well, I can plug into a car battery and work low power and amateur radio and communicate with somebody on the other side of the world if I have to. That was the primary reason for getting the license. But then we started doing wireless networking, 802.11a and 802.11b. And I thought, well, I got this. I know about the frequencies. I know about the antennas. I know about the polarization, especially at those frequencies. I understood the concepts of bandwidths and frequency and what would absorb and what would not absorb these signals and how far they would go. It just gives you that underlying foundation of knowledge. And I think it helped a lot. There's obviously so much more to amateur radio that goes beyond the scope of the basics of and foundations of wireless and the way wireless works, but it sure helped. And if it's something you're interested in, then everything else is there too. With getting an amateur radio license, you not only have to learn the technology, you have to learn the laws. This is a federally licensed thing. And so there's a lot of federal laws associated with how you can use them, when you can use them, what frequencies you can use, how you have to, what you have to say when you're using it, or how you have to transmit, and the things you are able to transmit and not transmit on wireless. So those things are there as well. So I didn't know about that. Thank you, Joe, that they'll give you a bonus for enlistment for getting your CompTIA certificate. If you get a cybersecurity profession, again, not a real thing, but okay, cybersecurity. It's a name. It's a real thing. We use that term, cybersecurity. Nobody seems to know what it means because it doesn't have a meaning. You have to now, whenever somebody says, I'm interested in cybersecurity, well, thank you for asking. What do you mean by that? So if you ever hear anybody saying cybersecurity, the next logical question is, what do you mean by that? Because it's not a thing. It sounds great, though, doesn't it? It is the layer 3 switch of the modern age. Cybersecurity doesn't have a meaning, but I'm sure we can figure out what you're talking about if we just ask a question. Because it could mean, 4 or 5 different things, right? The idea of security is broad. Cyber is not a thing that's real. That doesn't exist. That's not a thing. It's just a name. It sounds great. But it's not. The concept of IT security is generally, when I talk to you about Security Plus, and the concepts on Security Plus is IT security. So if you get IT security profession, they train you, help you get more certificates. That's great. Certificates like Security Plus, CISA, CCNA, security, those are great certs to have. And if you're getting into any level of IT security, that's what employers are going to be looking for. Cybersecurity, sometimes it's dealing with development processes. So you'll hear people saying, I'm really interested in cybersecurity, and I'm going to be writing all this software. Okay, that's not software. That's more of computer science. We're talking IT here. That's computer science. And sometimes they'll go, well, I'm interested in being on the red team. I'm interested in being on the blue team. Okay. I'm assuming the red team is the Cardinals and the blue team is the Patriots. I don't know. Okay. We've come up with these very fancy names for describing security in our worlds. And I get red team, you're on offense, blue team, you're on defense. I get it. I know. I look forward to your cards and letters. It just seems an overly descriptive term to describe something that we already have terms for. That would be very useful if we were actually able to tell you from the beginning what we would like to do. Oh, I'd like to do pen testing. Okay, let's talk about that, because I can talk about some pen testing. Oh, I want to be able to set up firewalls. I want to do some cloud-based antivirus and anti-malware detection in real time. I want to be able to set some filters and understand application flows and be able to protect against those. Great. That's the blue team. So don't get too wrapped up in these crazy terms we use in our industry. Concentrate on what you want to do. That is going to be the most important thing going forward. There's so much potential in IT. You can do anything you want and move up into any level to make any amount of money that you would like in this industry. It's there and available for you. You just have to decide what you like. And sometimes you start off liking one thing and then something else catches your eye and you move off somewhere else. That's perfectly normal in this industry too. Think about what you want to do next. Once you get there, learn as much as you can, and then think about what you want to do next from there. There's no reason in IT to set up a 5 or 10-year plan. It's impossible to know what's going to happen with IT in 5 years. Things go crazy in this industry in 5 years. Think about what you want to do next, and then just go with the flow. You're going to be just fine. Well, thanks for hanging out for this additional hour of Q&A and the after show. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thanks for being here in that first hour and having all of the things that we talked with all the questions. It's always great to be able to do these. Stop by in a couple days on Thursday. We're doing this again with our Security Plus study group. We'd love to have you back here for that as well. And until we see you then, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.